She thinks politicians should make minimum wage. Let's see what she has to say in more detail, and then I'll give my thoughts as we go along.
So, when I was in high school, I wrote a paper arguing that if politicians had to live on minimum wage for just 1 year, policy in America would change overnight. For context, when I was in high school, when I wrote this paper, I was literally working 2 jobs while going to school. I remember being exhausted all the time, trying to balance work, school, home, transportation, responsibilities. Um, and there were actively grown adults in government arguing about whether or not kids like me deserved free lunch. And that stuck with me for years because I feel like it perfectly summarizes how disconnected some of these people are from real life. You have politicians that are making 6 figures arguing over whether or not struggling teenagers deserve to eat lunch at school. Not luxury, not vacations, not handouts, food. Because a lot of American legislation feels incredibly tone deaf. And I think part of the reason is because many of the people making these decisions have never experienced real financial struggle a day in their lives. A lot of them come from generational wealth, elite schools, family connections, old money, corporate backgrounds. Like, some of these people have literally never had to worry about their rent, never even rented, never had their electricity almost shut off, never skipped meals, never had to choose between groceries and gas, never experienced the exhaustion of living paycheck to paycheck. Yet they are the same people deciding minimum wage, healthcare access, housing policy, food assistance, student debt, maternity leave, and what poor people supposedly need to do better. And then people wonder why these policies feel so disconnected, because how can you properly solve a problem that you have never personally experienced? It's like me saying, oh, I've never struggled with addiction a day in my life, but I want to be in charge of the national addiction recovery programs. You can study something, you can read statistics, you can observe suffering from the outside, but lived experience matters.
That is true. Lived experience does matter. And one of the things I was going to say from the very beginning, once you said politicians, if they earn minimum wage for a year, things would be different. They need experience, right? So the one thing I've always said about politicians running governments is they don't have any real life experience. If you have real world experience running a business, running something and doing it well, this is why I've always believed there should be more business people in politics. It shouldn't just be people that come from Ivy League schools who have no real world experience, in many cases, managing what we do with our finances. So, yes, there are politicians who are out of touch. Making them earn minimum wage for a season, would that necessarily do the trick? Not necessarily, because they have savings. They come from a particular background. You see, a lot of poor people make poor decisions, irrespective of the money they have. You know how we know this? Because people, they say that win the lottery are normally broke within a few years. NBA players, NFL players, they are normally broke 4 to 5 years after retiring from the NBA or the NFL. What does that showcase to you? That showcases to you that just because you have more money, even gazillions more money, it doesn't necessarily translate into a better lifestyle and a better sustained lifestyle. So it is emotional when you hear someone talking about these guys are debating about whether these people should have free school meals or not. The funny thing is, I remember growing up, I lived with my dad growing up for the most part, right? My mum and dad were divorced. And it was funny because I lived with my dad. He wasn't like wealthy or anything like that, but because I lived with my dad and not my mum, single parent, I had to pay for lunch. I had to pay for school meals. My dad had to give me money to give to the school I think it was like once a week for the school meals. If I lived with my mum, they would have given me free meals. The point I'm really making before we listen to more of what she has to say is, it's not always about the things which are right in front of you. And this is the disconnect a lot of the time when you have people in different financial situations. A lot of people in financial hardship really believe if they had more money, things would be different. But for most of those people, it's not true. And you know what's painful about that? A lot of wealthy people, they know that and they acknowledge that. And they're trying to translate that information back to people who don't have as much. And I'll be real, when you are struggling financially, it's easy to take the victim card. And many people may think from the way I speak a lot of the time, and especially on a lot of different topics, that I'm making loads and loads and loads of money, right? Not necessarily. Not yet anyway. Not as much as I know I could make and will make by God's grace in the future through the different things I'm doing. But the difference is, regardless of my situation, I try to keep the same energy, I try to believe the same things, and I try to make the right decisions. Why? Because I have this philosophy that as long as there's enough time, the more wise decisions you make, they will eventually continue to pay you back in the future. So even if you're in a poor position, I talk about Joseph in the Bible all the time. He was thrown into slavery. That's below poverty. And he ascended to the top. You think about people like Daniel in the Bible. He's taken captive from his hometown, gone to a different country, and he ascends to the top. Wiping out the political game, the underhanded, backhanded tactics that's working against him. He ascended. Why? Because these are individuals who came from difficult situations, but didn't allow those situations to determine who they are. Yes, it's a sad thing that there are people that are struggling to pay for their children's meals. But if those are the same sorts of people who have a car note because they have a car which is well outside of their financial scenario, that's a bigger problem. Not understanding that I shouldn't be spending beyond my means, not on necessities, on leisure, on flossing and stunting. That's the problem. That's the problem that a lot of people face. And this is why a lot of the politicians, even though many of them are out of touch and don't know about these situations, listen, a politician, many of them, they care about pleasing people. They care more about pleasing people than telling the truth. That's why they will never say the stuff I'm saying in the way I'm saying it. Why? Because I actually love the people I'm communicating to. Whether you're poor, whether you're wealthy, it doesn't. I love you, and I'm going to give you the game as much as possible so you can continue to better the life for you and your family as much as possible. A politician isn't going to say, well, look, you need to change your spending habits. A politician isn't going to call you out for having a car note or any of this different kind of stuff. Most politicians, they don't care. This is why I always like, why are you wasting your time listening to the politicians? The politician cares about themselves. Why are you wasting time watching the news? What does the news have in store for you? Nothing. You should be spending as much time as possible in changing the scenarios that your family's in. Making better financial decisions, making better investments, spending more of your time efficiently on things which can actually move the needle in your family's lives. Not wasting time Netflix and chilling all night in the latest series that you just can't live without. No, live without it and use that time to do something which can transform your family's identity. We have to take more responsibility, more ownership, regardless of the situation. If you are poor, if you are struggling financially, even more so, because it matters more. You don't have the financial leeway to be doing some of this other stuff right now. You don't. So what you need to do in that situation is buckle down. Dave Ramsey always talks about beans and rice. Be someone who's on beans and rice until you don't need to be on beans and rice. I promise you, what a difference a year can make. What a difference 12 months can make. 12 months of sustained discipline, doing the right thing, it will compound. It's not only going to change your life for those 12 months, the months that continue to come after that. When you're paying off your debts, when you're paying for stuff, cash, Maybe that means putting money aside for a couple months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, but paying for it cash. Those are the kind of things which are going to transform the way you view life on a great level. But you can't just be thinking about yourself. You have to think about your children and your children's children at the bare minimum. You need to be thinking at least 2 generations after you. At least. Let alone thinking beyond. When you're doing that, you're going to be thinking differently. Let's see what more she has to say.
I'm not saying that only poor people can be politicians, but I do think that there's something deeply broken about millionaires and career politicians lecturing the working class about budgeting and survival when they've never had to survive. I don't think it's only disconnect anymore either. They're also like extremely apathetic. Like, these politicians sit in positions where they could materially improve the lives of millions of Americans. They could help raise wages, expand healthcare access, regulate housing costs, strengthen worker protections, make childcare affordable, reduce poverty on a massive scale. But instead, they spend their careers protecting corporate interests, lobbying groups, PACs, and wealthy donors, because that's where the money is. And
yes. And I'm not even saying that's a good thing. You've heard my view today on politics. I don't like politicians. Most of them lie. I'm going to change this, and then they get into power and then they don't change anything, right? They just say whatever many people, typically gullible people want to hear. So you vote for them, and then they make a decision, and then they go and do whatever they want to do. The fact of the matter is, you have to put yourself in a situation where you're not dependent on them. So I get it. Some of the stuff I'm saying may seem like, yeah, I'm apathetic, I'm out of touch, and all this kind of stuff. Like, no, it's not that. It's the fact that I need to give you what you actually need to hear, which will actually transform your life. Not what the politician is going to lie and say X, Y, Z, right? What is it worth to give someone more money if they're going to waste it? That doesn't make sense. If you want a successful, buoyant economy, people who are successful and buoyant are the people that should be running the country, should have these roles. Think about earlier when I talked about people in business. Successful business people should be the kind of people that are running the country, because they've shown they know how to manage a budget. They know how to get things done. They know how to create growth. That, I think, having more real world experience would make more sense than giving them or capping them or putting them on a minimum wage. If it was more incentivized as to the better you do in your constituency, right, your neighborhood, right, your jurisdiction, the better pay you get, that would be better. Because then you'd start to see people making good decisions because their benefits come from benefiting people. Where do you see that? In business. In business, the better decisions you make for your people, for your customers, for your clientele, the better things can be for you for a long-term sustained scenario. When it doesn't matter if you do good or well or not, and you still get the same paycheck, well, what's the point? I'm going to do whatever I need to do to stay in power and get the same paycheck. Minimum wage wouldn't help them. All that would do is say, well, I'm not going to go into politics. I'll do something else. But if you vary it, just like in business, you do well, you get paid well. You do poorly, you don't get paid. You get a base amount. That's the kind of thing which will change politicians and change politics as a whole. Guys, let me know what you think about what I said today in today's video. Do you agree with what she's saying? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Don't forget to like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, do not forget to react righteously. God bless.